So you guys probably saw in the last video, we got all of our suspension components back in the car. Now, as you can tell, the car's still not on the ground. And today we're gonna be taking a bunch of steps to make that happen. Also, with the new coilovers that we also have these adjustable camber plates at the top here. So on the opposite side, it is all the way to the front side here, and then this side is pushed all the way to the back. So I'm just gonna put them in the center for the time being until we get our new wheels on, and then that way we can adjust it a little bit more depending on the needs and the size of the wheels. You can adjust it back to 0, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that for the time being, and then we can adjust it back later. Now we just do the same thing on the other side and we should be good. Well, unfortunately, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video or not, but the dust caps for our hubs here are on back order. And unfortunately, I didn't get an update on when the ETA is for them to be shipped out. So we can't really finish up the hubs and the rotors and the brake assembly just yet, just because we need to make sure that these dust caps are on before everything else goes on. We're kind of stuck there. But the good news is we did get our new reinforcement plates for the subframe and our sway bar. So we have these custom made brackets here, and they're pretty thick, as you can tell. So the thought process is that since we had to cut into our subframe, this is gonna sit right where that sway bar bracket is. So that way, even if it does ever pop out, this thick piece of metal will kind of hold that in place until I notice that it's loose or anything. And it's just an extra precautionary measure since we had to do our own customization to the subframe, and it's not as strong as it would have been if we did it the proper way. So we're gonna go ahead and bolt the stock subframe bolt through this, and then this should hold that sway bar bracket in place. So I took that bracket and I shaved it down a good amount. I cut it almost in half. And I got it larger just because each side is a little bit different. Again, it is hand cut, so it's not gonna be perfect. But now I'll show you guys what I'm using this for and how it's gonna reinforce that sway bar bracket. So coming to the underside of the car, that is the subframe bolt, and that is our sway bar bracket. As you can tell, those little prongs aren't as far in as they should be into the subframe. So this bracket will sit somewhat like, and let me just place it before I show you guys how it's looking. Somewhat like that, so that it can kind of reinforce those prongs in place, and they're less likely to slip out. So then the subframe bolt would just go through the hole on this welded tab as well, not the welded tab, but this tab, as well as the subframe, and just kind of hold this bracket in place so that the sway bar doesn't come loose. Now in theory, this should work. I'm not sure if it's gonna work in reality, but that's the goal that I have here, and that's why we're using this piece. And just like that, we got both brackets ready to go, cut up to size, and they are a little bit different, but we're gonna go ahead and do a coat of paint on here so they don't rust. Now, while we're waiting for that bracket to dry, we need to go ahead and start tightening up everything on the hub assembly. So that means the outer tie rod, the lower control arm bolt, as well as our suspension adjustment. So the coilover adjustment collars, those need to be tightened up. So let's go ahead and do that now. Make sure that everything else is tight. And I'll just go ahead and start with the easiest thing, and that's gonna be this collar right here. I don't know if there's any torque specs to this. I'm just guessing, to be honest, but I'm just gonna tighten that up to snug. And we're gonna leave it on the lowest setting, and then we'll adjust it again if it is too low, which I doubt it will be. And now that we have everything bolted up, we have our subframe bolts tightened up to spec. I think it's about 35 to 40 foot-pounds, which seems kind of light to me, but that's what I'm seeing on the forum. So if you know otherwise, please drop it in the comments, because again, that seems very light. Now that we have all that situated, we can finally lower the engine back onto the subframe itself, and then from there we can tighten up our engine mounts. One thing about bushings, they don't really tell you this, but it's always best to tighten up the poly bushings once you have some weight on them. And I think for the engine mounts, it's only going to be about 10 to 15 foot-pounds, something like that. I'll verify, but if I recall, that's all you really need to put on those. That we got everything mounted up. We got our engine mounts tightened up on both sides, and it's kind of hard to tell the torque spec with such a big torque wrench. So I am going to get a smaller one and just make sure that it's around the 12 to 15 foot-pound mark, because I noticed that my transmission mounts were a little bit too tight, and it was causing the car to shake a good amount. I'm not sure what the reasoning is behind that, but I think I torqued down the transmission ones a little bit too much. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen up the front and the transmission ones just a little bit once I get the smaller torque wrench, just to make sure that everything is sitting how it should. So it's the next day now, and we're back working on the E30, obviously, because there's nothing else to work on. But one thing that we're gonna start focusing on now is the actual parking brake cable. So since there's nothing else that we can do on the front, and we're kind of stuck waiting until we get our new dust caps, we thought, why not finish up the rear? I jacked it up just a little bit more so that we could feed the brake cable, the parking brake cable, up into place. As you can see, we got one side done. Now we gotta pull the other one, which is right down there. So that just needs to be fed through here, and then we can start tightening it up, and then hopefully check if we put in our brake assembly properly. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. Should be an easier job since we got another person here to help, but it was kind of impossible to do by myself. So glad we have him here now, and should be a lot quicker of a job. So let's see if we can get this on. I did have to remove this center console piece to make this possible, but we got one side done, so should be a little bit easier on this side. Just let me know when to pull it.
Yeah, you can pull it now. You're on there.
Okay, I need a little bit more if you can give me some.
Is that good?
We're really close. And just like that, we got the new hardware on, and you can see the cables are peeking through. So now it's just a matter of tightening those, but we won't do that just yet, just because we want to make sure that our wheels still spin once the handbrake is down, and when it's up, then everything should lock up. So we'll have to play around with that a little bit before we can finalize it. One of the last things that we need to do on this car, for the rear at least, I was saving this for one of the last steps, and that's because, one, I didn't have the proper tool for it, but now we do, and that is our diff fluid. As you can see, we got our Valvoline synthetic 75W90 diff fluid, and we'll go ahead and replace all the old diff fluid that's in the car. The one that's in the car is mixed with a little bit of water, brake fluid, and so on. So we'll go ahead and drain all that out, put our new diff fluid in, and then from there, we should be pretty good to go. And we're just waiting on the last part, which is that piece right there. Such a small piece, but it's holding up the entire project, which sucks because this car would have been on the ground already if it wasn't, but it is what it is. We'll go ahead and just do that on the next video, and I guess for this one we'll call it here because we do need to work on this thing here. You guys will probably see this in one of the next few videos, but yeah, that's it for the E30 today at least. Appreciate you all watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.